Okay, on the bench today we have an SBE-40CB. That's the actual model number, and it's a Console V. Probably one of my favorite 40-channel sideband CB radios, because if you're going to have a company name like Sideband Engineers, you better have a really good sideband radio. And they did not fail. They made a really nice radio. They did have some downfalls, the circuit boards in these things, and solder joints, common problems with these things, cold solder joints. I don't really even think it's so much just cold solder joints. It was just the type of circuit board they used. They're double-sided, and they do not have through-plated holes. And it's a cheaper board, and it's not just an SBE thing. Any of the early CB radios in this vintage that had a double-sided board, they're going to have the same problems as this one. So it's not, only SBE. It was anybody that had the early double-sided circuit boards and CBs. They were cheaper. Circuit boards aren't cheap, bought as cheaply as nowadays, really good high-quality FR4 boards with through-plated holes. Yeah, it wasn't so much like that back in the day. But this one, the customer bought this. He was told this was a new old stock radio out of box. So, and I'd believe that. It's in exceptional condition. Only problem is a little bit of dirt, on the ledges, all this chrome that sticks out here. A little bit of dust and dirt, so it looks like, may have been set out on display, but I don't think it was ever used. The cord, it looked like it had never been unwrapped. It was still wound up. There's absolutely no wear on the faceplate. The cabinet's in excellent condition, so I'd believe that. He had it shipped directly to me. Now, of course, before I plug anything in, I always take it out of the cabinet, make sure there's nothing actually wrong before I go plugging something in. Important things like check fuses, because people have a bad habit of, blowing a fuse and putting in, 1, 5, 10, or 100 times too big a fuse in things. Because I have found shit like 10, 20, and 30 amp fuses in CB radios like this. So always check the fuses. They're there for a reason, to blow, so your radio doesn't. So after I verified everything there was okay, I plugged it in, turned it on. No sound. Tried transmitting an AM. I had a carrier, but I had no modulation. So we obviously had a problem in the audio circuit. So the audio circuit is shared for your modulation circuit and for what actually comes out of the speaker. No need to put two audio amplifiers in a radio if they're both going to do the exact same thing. And most all CB radios are like that. So I checked the solder connections. Actually, because this is new old stock, don't think that board's gone through a lot of heating and cooling cycles. The solder connections all looked fine. They were nice and shiny on both sides of the board. Well, not so much on this side. This kind of has that sandblasted appearance. But the other side, which is actually the component side, that's usually where they tend to fail, and those still look nice and shiny on that side. So what I actually found was a bad connection at the audio amp itself. So it's a SIP, or single inline package, SIP, audio amplifier. The only problem is when they installed this thing here, they've got a slot cut in the board, and the leads come through, but that's all they do. They're not long enough, so they actually, this in between my two fingers here is that slot down there, the audio amp's down here. That's about all you see. If you look across the board, the terminals just barely protrude through the board there. They didn't leave them long enough to bend them over onto the solder pads on the board. I have no clue why in the hell they did that. Makes absolutely no sense to me. Not going to even try and speculate. They just had, what they did was to bridge that gap in between the edge of the board and the actual terminal. They just bridged it with solder, and that solder had broken. So that could have happened in transit to me, or even just me taking the radio out of the case and moving it around. It could have popped loose. I found it rather quickly, because once I found out, I was actually going to flip the radio up on its side to do some troubleshooting. As soon as I picked this corner up, just to kind of lift the radio up, you can see the whole chassis flexes. As soon as I just barely picked this up, the audio came back. Let go of it, off, on, So, yeah, that's all it was. The lead was there. When I'd pick it up and flex the chassis, that lead was coming in contact with the solder where it had broken. So that's been fixed. The only thing the customer wanted done to this was basically recap and an alignment. That's been done. It's a good working radio now. I think I've covered before, but just in case I haven't, this has and I like to keep kind of driving the nail home with this, because a lot of people think their radio's broken when it's not. This has scan. The problem is they put it into scan, and as you can see, nothing's happening. Well, that's because nothing is supposed to be happening. You have to remember, back when this radio was actually made, that was the CB boom. So everybody had a CB radio, and the channels were horribly crowded. Finding an empty channel to talk on was hard. Nowadays, in some areas, you may not have hardly any traffic. It may be hard finding someone to talk to. Back in the day, you couldn't find an empty channel to go have a conversation just by yourself, or, with some other person. So they had this scan feature. Now there are other, and this isn't unique to this radio. There's other radios that had this open channel scan. Now some radios were better than this. They had a selectable open or busy channel scan. But this one scans for an open channel. So if there's 39 channels that have a signal on it and one that doesn't, when you flip through you flip the scan on, you have your squelch turned up, it'll sense there's somebody on every channel. When it gets to a channel where there's no activity, the scan will stop. So that's what the scan actually does. Another thing is this is early TTL, CMOS, and a masked style microprocessor in this. So this does not actually have a channel selector rotary switch. It's actually a rotary encoder, because you can see when I have it in scan, if I turn the knob, nothing happens. That's the first dead giveaway. It's not actually a channel selector. And you can see in here, it only has 3 wires attached to it. So it's actually just an encoder. Take it back off scan. Now, the other kind of unique thing, I don't really need to cover any of the other controls because they're all kind of self-explanatory, but it has a dual meter, and I like that. It looks nice, and they're actually, both meter movements are in the same meter housing. Another thing's kind of unique to this. One's right side up, the other one hangs upside down. This is your normal meter, has all your normal things in it, SWR, power, and your signal meter. This meter up here is a Squelch Meter. And that's actually kind of nice. You can use that especially when you're searching for open channels, which makes it kind of useless. But it's still kind of nice because, unlike normally when you set your squelch, see that needle's moving? When I turn the Squelch Control? Okay. What that is designed to do, it's actually calibrated. Those numbers right there, 1 through 8, they're actually S units, just like down here on your S meter. So what you can do is whatever channel you're on, let's say 19, you can set your squelch at really low, so somebody just barely hits squelch, it'll break. Or you can set it to something like 5 S units. That's actually what that represents. 5 S units over basically the noise floor. That's how much signal it'll take to break squelch. Or you can pick a lower number, like 3 or 2 or 1. Right now it's stopped at 1.5. So if a signal 1.5 S units over the noise floor comes in, it'll break squelch. So that's actually kind of nice. You don't have to guess. You can it has a nice little different color gradations there, so that's kind of actually a neat feature. And you can actually, like I say, still practically use that. It's not as useful because scanning for an open channel nowadays is kind of useless. The underside, which is the business side on one of these, because the board is mounted kind of like you would find in a mobile radio. So this has the double, well, it's not actually double board. The microprocessor and a lot of the TTL ICs are actually mounted to the main board, but then there's this little daughter board sits inside this RF shield, and there's your sideband, your offset frequencies. That's what most of this is in here. Your carrier null adjustments are in here, but each of these have little covers. But one of the things that makes these really nice radios exceptional receivers. That's one thing SBE radios were known for, especially their sidebands. Like I say, you're going to have a company called Sideband Engineers. You better damn sure make a good sideband radio, and they didn't fail. Really good crystal filters. It's a little bit more narrow than a lot of them, so it really helps to keep out a lot of noise and adjacent channel splatter and whatnot. Another advantage to this radio, and it isn't unique to this radio, it was used in a lot of their other radios, but they have a speech compression board. So the Sidebander 5, which was the mobile radio, it has the same thing. I just did, literally just before this radio, I did a SBE Touchcom 40. So that's an AM radio, has a really unique mic with volume, squelch, channel buttons, and a channel display in the microphone. Even it has one of these. But they're really nice, and if you set these up properly, they work really well and they sound good. Now you do need a signal generator and an oscilloscope to properly align, because this is actually part of the alignment. Adjusting the gain and the compression levels, and like I say, you do need an oscilloscope to properly set it so it does not add distortion to your signal, because if you turn, especially this one here, if you turn this up too far, you're going to get distortion. So yeah, and that's actually why there's that little lead sticking up right there. That's actually one of the test points for this. You actually adjust this. You inject 10 millivolts, 1000 hertz audio tone into the mic jack, hook up your oscilloscope there, and you adjust for maximum amplitude with no distortion. So you just basically start turning this pot up until your sine wave starts to clip, and then you back it off until it's still a nice perfect sine wave. That sets that. Then you hook up basically to the output here, this little coax cable here. They actually have you hook up to a diode down here, but you can hook up directly to the wiper on this pot. And then what you want to adjust for is an output with 10 millivolts in. You want to adjust for 40 millivolts peak-to-peak output at basically at the wiper, because that's the last thing the signal goes through, is actually comes out through that variable resistor right there, that little trimmer resistor. But like I say, that adds really good punch for audio. I mean, it's a simple circuit. Now, some people would, because I've actually recommended to people, well, why don't you, they say I want a little compression module for my radio. There you go. There it is. Just duplicate that. The schematic's in the SAMS manual. It's in the SBE service manuals. Just duplicate that circuit. And the first thing they always say is, yeah, but that little Pesley, that's the company that made that Pesley IC down there, that's not made anymore. Hoo-ha. That's all I got to say. You haven't searched hard enough. Trust me, the Chinese will start making anything. Let something become obsolete in electronics, and the Chinese will start making it. And they did not fail in that. I don't even remember, what the hell did I order? 100 or 200 of them. I ordered a couple sticks of them. But, yeah, I did some looking, because I actually needed one. I had one that was bad. And save from having to pull one out, because I actually have a bunch of these. I don't know why somebody would remove these from a radio, but I got a box lot of stuff one time that I bought. There was a bunch of these SBE compression modules in the box. I've got like 2 or 3 of them left that I haven't used, because I've actually installed a couple of them in other radios because I like them so much. But, save from having to steal the IC off of one of those, like I say, I went online, found, yeah, hell, there's companies still making, or a Chinese company, once these stopped being produced, there's a Chinese companies now making them, and they work just fine. The quality seemed fine to me, so, yeah, just a lot of times little things like that, just because original manufacturer's not making it, doesn't mean that basically the aftermarket hasn't. Kind of like car parts. Yeah, give it a little bit of time, and trust me, some aftermarket company is going to start reproducing it. So, like I say, I actually like these. So if you're looking for a speech compression circuit, small, simple, works really well, this is a good one to duplicate. Get the SAMS manual, or you can download, like the Touchcom 40, the Sidebander 5s, the Console 5. A lot of the SBE radios had this exact module in it. And it's very simple. Power, ground, input, output. That's all the connections there are. Black wire is ground. This violet wire is the power. Audio in, audio out. It doesn't get much simpler than that. So, but there you go. There's the underside. board layout's the same as the Sidebander 5. Good radios. These have actually really good suppression for 54 megahertz. You can literally adjust this thing down to basically zero output at 54 megahertz. That's what that trimmer capacitor right there is for. That's part of your 54 megahertz trap circuit. I was able to get this thing down into the noise floor, the output on the second harmonic. So yeah, really, really good suppression of the second harmonic level. But so there you go. There's a basically new old stock SBE Console 5. Now all I gotta do is get her put back together, clean off a little bit of what I call shelf dust, because I think that's probably what this was a display radio for somebody. And I can get this boxed up with the Touchcom 40 and a couple Turner microphones for that customer and get it sent back to him, and he can start talking on them, because these are a pleasure to use because they are really, really nice radios.